Hi everyone, it's Jeanette here from the Sewing Studio with a viewer request, double Irish chain. I'm smiling because I had so much fun. Now I was actually due to do an Irish chain quilt because one of the quilt groups I belong to, Irish chain is our group quilt for this year. So I've done the single and I was thinking I was going to do the double. So the two have coincided. It's a double Irish chain. Now this is the one I've been doing for myself and I've been using Kansas Troubles fabrics. Now there's a variety in there. It's mostly, however, daffodils and dragonflies, but there are some other leftover bits and pieces that are in there as well. So yeah, love this quilt. It's very autumnal feel to me and I'm thinking I'm going to back this one once I've put some borders on it with maybe some flannel or something to make it really nice and snuggly. Anyway, let's have a look how to make it. It's made up of 2 blocks. So let's have a look at how to make them. Now I refer to them as like the patchwork block and the background block, just for ease in my own mind. And I'm going to start with the patchwork block. Now this is all using 2.5-inch strips. I actually pieced mine from squares because there were a lot of leftover fabrics in there. I already had a lot of it cut as 2.5-inch squares. So it was sort of easier for me to continue that down that road, but you can do it with strips. It's a bit faster with strips, but I will say for me, I think sometimes you lose a little bit of accuracy with the strips. So, you know, sort of what you gain in one, you sort of have to, you lose a little bit in the other. As I said, I did it from squares and also I used it as a leader ender project. And to me, squares for leader and ender is easier in my mind than strips. So it came together quite quickly, even by doing them block by block in squares. But I'm going to show you the strip method. So it's made up of 3 different strip sets within that patchwork block. So we're going to have a quick look at some of them here. I'm not going to piece them all because once you get the gist of putting the strip sets together, you'll be away. So we have one strip set which needs to look like this. And this is where you have a background, 3 of your coloured fabrics and then another background. And in each block, you're just going to have 1 strip of those. We then need strip sets that are made up of 5 coloured fabrics, and that's what I've got here. 1 that's already been trimmed to 2.5 inches, and 1 which I can do it now, and actually I'll do that one while we're at it, and then 1 strip set we're going to sew, and we'll cut that one in a minute. But let's start, and I'm just going to cut this down to 2.5 inches wide. And I need 2 of those. Now I'm using 2 different strip sets, so I tend to go through, if I was going to do strip sets, and make all my different strip sets first, and then I can sort of mix and match them around. So mine is sort of a scrappy version of this. Now I do encourage you to have a look on the internet. There are loads of different layouts for the double Irish chain, and they have sort of chains within chains and all sorts. So please do go and have a look for inspiration. Like I said, I've just done sort of a random scrappy version, but there are more formal versions which look absolutely stunning. Now, the other thing while I'm cutting this, just for me to say, is if you're doing strip sets, I would suggest you just sew 1 and check that it's coming out at the right size. So we've got 5 strips here, sewn together with 1/4 inch, so that should come out at 10.5 inches. So please do check that. You do need an accurate 1/4 inch because the 2 blocks need to fit together and the second block doesn't have as many seams. So if your 1/4 inch is off, it's going to be really off in one block and not off so bad in the other. I hope that made sense. So just do 1 and check it's coming out at 10.5, and if it's not, please do make your adjustments because you will have a problem fitting it all together at the end if your 2 different blocks come out at different sizes. So we do need some accuracy on this one. So I need 2 of those for the block. I need 1 of these. And then we'll make our final strip set. And I'm going to start to build the block. I'm going to put that one up there out the way because we've finished with that one now. So that's going to be the centre of my block. And then these bits are going to go either side. And then we're just going to make the 2 outside edges. Just move that one up. So I'm going to go colour, colour, background, colour, colour. So let me just lay those 3 different strip sets next to each other so you can see them all. So we've got all 5 colours, one with one background in the centre and one strip set with background strips on the outsides and 3 colours in the centre. And for each block we need 1 of those, 2 of those and 2 of those. Hope that makes sense. Right, so let's just go to the machine and we're going to piece this together with 1/4 inch seams. Now I'm using a new machine we've got here to use in the studio, which is the Brother VQ2. And I've already tested that my 1/4 inch is coming out accurately on this one. And so I've got my 1/4 inch and I've got my 1/4 inch setting going on this. So there we are, that's what that strip set looks like. So I'm going to take that to the iron and press. Now I'm just going to refer to the direction of my seams on this one. My centre seam is going down, they're going up. So on this one, I want my seams to be going down again, and then that will all nest. So there we are, so we're ready to cut that one, and I'm just going to use 2 pieces of this, and these are going to go in positions 1 and 5. Now I'll just put that under the camera and just explain what I'm doing there for any sort of new people to quilting. To get a straight line here, I'm lining up one of my lines on the ruler with one of my seams. And then I can make my cut. Now I always over trim on the first one and then trim it back to the size it needs to be. So that's 2.5. And 2.5. So let's just lay it all out. So that's how our block should look. So in effect, what we've got is one background square in the middle of each of the outside rows. So now we can take those to the machine and put those together. I'm going to leave that one separate. Right, let's sew those. There we are, so there's our block, and I'm just going to take that to the iron and give it a press. So there it is, and that block should come out at 10.5 inches unfinished, so it's going to finish at 10 inches in the quilt. So that's the patchwork block, or the first block we're going to do. Now the second block we need to do to put together with this is what I refer to as the background block. So I'm going to do this in a strip set as well. So what I've got here is a piece of my background fabric, and I cut that at 6.5 inches. Now if you're doing this with strips, you can do 6.5 inches by your full width of fabric, and then you can put a jelly roll or 2.5 inch strip onto that. However, if you prefer to work with shorter lengths, you can do it with sort of what I call a half width strip. So you could do sort of your 21 inches or 22 inches piece of fabric by 6.5. So half of your width of fabric, and cut your jelly roll strips in half. And some people find that easier to work with, both for sewing and also for pressing. So you haven't got a huge long strip to press. Now I've just got a couple of pieces here just as sort of demo pieces. But basically we've got a 6.5 inch wide piece in the centre, and we're going to add 2.5 inch strips either side. And then for this one, we're going to once again cut 2.5 inch segments off of it. Now once again, I tend to make all of my units and then I can sort of mix and match them. So I end up with sort of different squares in different pieces. So I've done the same here with those two pieces. So you can see I've added some different pieces on. Now, if you wanted to do that from squares, you could just cut a 2.5 by 6.5 inch strip and then add 2.5 inch squares to the ends. So if you were using your leftover 2.5 inch squares from your 2.5 inch square box, for example, which is what I was doing, that's how I'd make those. So you've got the options. You can do it from squares or you can do it from strips. So I'm actually going to use these two because it matches my background fabric better. And we're literally now just going to sew those two onto the side of that block. So we'll end up with 10.5 inches by 6.5 inches width. So when we put our 2.5 inch strips to the side, it'll end up as 10.5 inch square. I will put all the measurements for the individual pieces in the description. So we're just going to sew these onto the side. I wasn't trimming the block there, I was just literally taking off those little stringy bits. So that's our two blocks. So the whole quilt is just made of those two blocks. So let's go and have a little bit of a closer look of how they come together. So here are all the blocks put together. So this is the patchwork block here, and you can see those 4 background squares there that we had going around the outside. And then the background block next to it with the 4 coloured corners is this block here. So we're just going to alternate between those blocks. So we start with the patchwork, then the background, and then on the next row, we transpose that and put the background and then the patchwork. And we get this lovely chaining effect going all the way through the quilt. Now I made 35 blocks. So I've got 18 of my patchwork blocks and 17 of the background. Now I worked out for this, that takes about 1 3/4 meters of background fabric, and I took the maths, and I think also if you did yards, I think 1 3/4 yards should be sufficient for this size. And for the patchwork blocks, for all this fabric, I didn't actually work it out in strips, but you need a total of 446 individual little 2.5 inch squares. So if you calculate that on the basis that you get 16 squares from one strip, you can sort of backwards engineer the maths if you like. So 446 divided by 16 will give you how many strips of jelly roll you'd need for this. But 1 jelly roll I think should be more than enough to do it. My centre of my quilt so far is coming out at 50 by 70, so I've got 5 across and 7 rows down. So I'm going to add some borders, I'm going to find a nice fabric, and I'm not quite sure which colour to pick out, but it's probably going to be, I don't know actually, I'm not going to even make a guess. I don't think it's going to be the blue, it's probably going to be one of the warmer colours I think from this, because as I said, this is definitely feeling very autumnal to me. And then once again, I'm going to add probably a flannel backing to this and bind it. But as I said, at this point, it's coming out at 50 by 70 inches. So it's a really nice one to do. It's actually fairly quick. Definitely doing squares, you could use it as a leader ender project. But my only warning is really do just watch the accuracy of that 1/4 inch because of all the number of seams you've got in your patchwork block. And you really do need these to be coming out at the same size as those. So I hope for the viewer who requested, can I show you double Irish chain? I hope you've enjoyed that. I hope many other of you that are viewing also enjoyed that. It's absolutely a lot of fun, and definitely not my first or last double Irish chain quilt I'm ever going to be making. I'd like to see it in lots of different colours because, as you know, different colours, they always come out a little bit different depending on the fabrics we use. So I hope you enjoyed that. Thank you very much. If you do make it, as always, please do share your photos with us on Instagram and Facebook in particular, or you can email your photos in here to us. We love to see what you're doing out there. So thank you for your time here today, and do join us again here next time in the sewing studio.